sumasama ang loob ko. Kaya ang nangyayari, pinipilit kong baguhin natin ito.
To those who are a little bit wary about this Public Service Act being open. Yeah, with all due respect, I agree with the reciprocity, but the first one I don't. Because if you have a strict regulatory framework, then it can be a to whom it may concern. So I think we should not ban XYZ.
Just a quick correction for the record. With all due respect, I certainly did not say that Filipino first is a passé policy. In fact,
One
I
of your
believe
source persons, I stand.
Which means to talk. That's why Parliament is like talking environment. You talk. If you zipper your mouth there, I mean, you'll be ousted in the next election because everybody. That's why no bobo can be member of Parliament. By
Wala na ho akong pag-uusapan dito, kundi mag-parliamentary na tayo. Para harap-harapan tayo. Ang hirap ng ganito, taguan eh. Hindi ako sanay sa taguan. Mambihira, oo.
who owns what, you know? I think I care who gives the best service, and I really don't care who you are. Whether you're a corporate person or you are a corporation, you're an individual, you're a collective, whoever gives the best service. There is no socialist way of repairing a road, is there? Is there a democratic way of repairing a road? No, you just repair the road, and it doesn't even have a label on it. I think we should be, I don't know, we should be realistic about these things. Why are we putting labels on everything and putting political color? If telcos want to come here, let them come here. You know, if the present telcos are not giving us the services that we want, we're one of the slowest telcos in the world. As I said, you can come from Saturn and I don't care.
Dr. Carlos, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I was taking down notes earlier as I listened to Senator Poe and Senator Hontiveros, and I'd like to address the issues that they have raised. I think I'd like to take off from the point of view of social scientists who's looking at this from a macro standpoint. So I will not go into the nitty-gritty because all my colleagues here have already addressed many dimensions of the issue. I think the first question of Senator Grace is, do we need to change the Constitution to declare that we're open for business? And the quick and dirty answer there would be no, because you already are making so many legislative actions to open up the economy. But I think the challenge there is it opening up enough, or are we addressing really what we want to happen? Here, I'd like to go into a bit of epistemology, if you don't mind, which is, you know, when you establish something and you say that you know something, that means you have identified a composite of variables which will bring about a particular result, isn't it? Now here, as I listen to the very intelligent comments around the table and those who are joining us virtually, and I noticed that we are not able to categorize our variables into most critical, less critical, and so on. In other words, we don't have an ordinal list where one is first, second, etc. And that one, as I agree with Dr. Fabella, cannot be an article of faith. It has to be empirically grounded. So however much we believe in these things, as a social scientist, if they are not empirically grounded, ay laway lang po yan. Okay, so I think because all the senators have their own research component, I would like them to pay attention to grounding all these claims. And it's only if we have the hard evidence, the evidence conditions that will support them, that we can declare that we know something. That's the reason why you will notice we're shooting here, there, and everywhere, is because we're not able to categorize them into the most important, less important, etc. Okay, of course, remember I've been part of the cabinet for X number of months as National Security Advisor. One of the things I put together there would be to present to our president in one cabinet meeting, I think it was late October or early November, a national strategy. Why do we need a national strategy? And this is where I had, had to cross swords with one of my colleagues, the NEDA head. Sabi niya, ba't mo pa kailangan national strategy? Andiyan na nga yung NEDA plan. Sabi ko, tinuro ko din siya. Sabi ko, bakit naman sa national plan mo wala man lang isang single line dan about national security? And because I was the vice chair of the NTF-LCAC also at the time, bakit wala man lang dyan nakatutok tungkol doon sa mga barangay natin at anong gagawin dito sa mga natitira pa na mga influence barangay? Wala talaga doon yan. I mean, i-google niyo yan at saliksikan niyo yan. Okay, what am I saying? If we're just shooting here, there, and everywhere, and we don't have anything, a big picture that will crochet together, that will stitch together all these things, then we don't know what to do. In terms of, konti na nga ang salapi mo, kung saan-saan mo pa nilalagay. Kapag the national strategy ka, pag konti ang salapi mo, alam mo, ito yung number one, yun ang una mong bigyan ng pansin. Ganun din siguro dito, no? Bakit tayo masyadong nagre-rely sa foreign investment? What about domestic investment? Hindi ba natin nakita yung sinabi na nga, yung regulatory framework, ang sinabi ni Dr. Villegas kanina, kahit ang inyong mga domestic investor ay sinasakal din ng over-regulation ng ating gobyerno. Parang ang unang assumption mo ikaw ay magnanakaw, saka mo na i-prove otherwise, no? Bakit ganon? In other words, while we are so much banking in foreign direct investment, we should also bank on our local investors and talagang bigyan niya sila ng alagwa para talagang magawa nila ang kanilang ginagawa. Bigyan ko kayo ng example, no? My former boss here, Senator Tolentino at the MMDA, I was there with him since 2010 as one of his consultants for the traffic management. Dines namin, Senator, I don't know kung nakwento ko na sa iyo to, kung paano yung bureaucracy natin as been identified by other resource persons, no, is really one of the major obstacles to why no investment is coming in. Merong isang gripo dyan na nagtutulo, no? So sabi ko, ang bilis na, ang madali naman bumili ng gripo, parang 200 pesos. Sabi ko, sundan natin kung paano magbili ng gripo. Alam niyo ba kung gaano yun? 4 na buwan. Tinrace namin ito, Senator Tolentino, 4 na buwan at 26 signatures para po makabili ng gripo. Gusto ko lang to make the point na the bureaucracy really matters. You have a Byzantine bureaucracy, and I have seen polls of foreign investors telling you that there are 2 major things, critical variables that matter to them, are Byzantine bureaucracy and the level of corruption. Yung ownership, they don't matter. By the way, tama si Dr. Fabella. Ownership by Filipinos is an article of faith. It doesn't matter who owns it. Sabi ko nga, sa telco, galing pa siya sa Jupiter, basta magpagawa siya talaga ng internet, okay lang. Does ownership matter? No, not anymore. In the university, we're telling our students, we're training you to be citizens of the world. We are breaking down all the boundaries of the artificial nation state. We already made commitments in ASEAN for regional integration. Why, for heaven's sakes, I was always so preoccupied on, keeping the nation state. It's one of the scourges of humanity, if I may say so. So, last point, yung Filipino first po, tama po si Senator Hontiveros. Pasay na po yan. It should be rendered obsolescent, no? Bakit Filipino first? Because once upon a time in the past, we tried to, to divest ourselves of all the colonial things that chained us, no, to the former colonial rulers of our country. Huwag na po tayong Filipino first. No one study I have seen thus far has demonstrated quite creditably that ownership by Filipinos work. I challenge anyone here around the table, the social scientists. Meron bang ganyan? Wala po. Ownership doesn't matter. No? But what we really want is, in fact, I had suggested in one of my papers that if our economic managers cannot, in fact, lower or eradicate the 21% of their big legacies na sinabi mo, no, na mga poor, mag-hire tayo po ng international group of economic managers. We pay them depending on the percentage of increment that they are going to contribute to GDP. I know this is an iconoclastic viewpoint, but for God's sake, we have to be iconoclasts now. We are the 5th most mineralized countries in the world. We have millions of professionals. We should be embarrassed that we have 21% who are poor. Tama ba, Dr. Villegas? Tama, di ba? So I think, let me go back to the issue of a national strategy. I address this also to the military. Several times they have asked me to help them design their strategy for the Air Force, for the Philippine Marines, etc. Sabi ko, saan ba kayo nakatukod yung strategy nyo? Meron bang National Defense Plan? O bungang isip nyo lang yan? Saan magagaling yung National Defense Plan, Senator po? Hindi ba magagaling yan sa national strategy? Dibuho yan eh. It's a big, big picture. And siguro lastly, sorry sa Senator Angara, medyo nagsasobra na ata ako sa time ko. Senator po, you mentioned something about banning certain countries from ownership. And are you referring to China?
In the Public Service Act, any country that the President or the National Security Council views as a threat to us is actually eliminated from or banned from owning certain critical infrastructure, telecommunications, for example, I believe airports, etc. And also, countries that don't reciprocate or allow us also the same type of ownership in their country would not be allowed. Those are some of the safeguards we put as a compromise to those who are a little bit wary about this Public Service Act being open.
Yeah, with all due respect, I agree with the reciprocity, but the first one I don't. Because if you have a strict regulatory framework, then it can be a to whom it may concern. So I think we should not ban XYZ, whichever country. So thank you very much.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Carlos. Senator Risa, yes?
Salamat, Mr. Chair. Just a quick correction for the record. With all due respect, I certainly did not say that Filipino first is a passé policy. In fact,
One
I
of your
believe...
source persons, I stand corrected.
Thank you, ma'am. In fact, I believe that Filipino first is a positive and dynamic principle in formulating and constantly updating our economic policy. And lastly, Mr. Chair, at this point, if 60 to 100% ownership in Filipino hands doesn't matter anyway in the big picture, then let's keep that in Filipino hands and work on the real problems identified both by those opposed to and supportive of RBH 6. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Risa.
Mr. Chair, just a quick comment.
Yes,
I
Senator
would like to thank also Dr. Carlos for bringing up something that we haven't really discussed in our minds being focused on foreign direct investments. It's true, local businesses are also suffering. What we're trying to do is we're actually hunting in the zoo, like the ones that are complying with the laws, paying taxes, are the ones being audited, while the ones that are in the informal economy getting away with so much, we don't focus our attention on. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you, Senator Risa, Senator Po. It's definitely, we're not abandoning the Filipino first. In fact, Congress just passed the Tatak Pinoy strategy, which is an attempt at industrial policy, albeit somewhat belated for the region. No?
Sponsored and authored by our chairman.
Thank you for the salamat sa patalastas. Thank you. Thank you. We'd like to
Senator, just make a final comment. As a social scientist, I'd like an article of faith to have empirical evidence. We cannot work on an article of faith. Filipino first policy should be rendered obsolescent.
thank you. Thank you. Yes.
Just a quick manifestation in response to one of the later points raised by Attorney Ocampo. Tingin ko nga, and this is related to one of the questions I'll raise when my turn comes later. Sa tingin ko po, sobrang critical nga na hindi lang ipagkatiwala, carte blanche, sa mga future na hindi pa natin kilalang mga kongreso ang ganitong ka-critical na usapin. Salamat, Mr. Chair.
I guess it's a debate about political maturity also, di ba?
Very important.
If you don't give that power to institutions, then when do you become mature? Diba?
Correct,
If you
correct.
assume immaturity. Dr. Villar.
No, that's a very important point. When we wrote the Constitution, who were we, 50 members of the Commission, who would say that we are the only ones who can protect the Philippine welfare? It's, I think, unfair to say we don't trust the future. What about us? Do they trust us? Who are we?
I trust you, sir. I trust you.
No, but
I trust.
precisely when I was against so many of these restrictions, they were saying, "Oh, we cannot trust the future legislature." But do you think we are trustable? We are trustable.
I think it's part of our journey to being a mature political democracy.
Exactly.
So,
I
how much
cannot-
power do we entrust to our legislators who are elected by the people, and they are our representatives at the end of the day,
Exactly.
whether we like what they're doing or not. No? So that's where elections come in, and we make our choices. Yes, Commissioner Sarmiento.
There is mention by Attorney Jude about general welfare as a guide for legislators and lawmakers, and reference is made by Justice Carpio to reciprocity. There is a provision that will guide us actually in the article on the national economy, addressing these 2 points. It's in section 13 that provides the state shall pursue a trade policy that serves the general welfare and utilizes all forms and arrangements of exchange on the basis of equality and reciprocity. So this addresses or answers the question or the suggestion of Justice Carpio and the points raised by Attorney Chun. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Chair.
Thank you very much for pointing that out, Commissioner Sarmiento. Next, we'll have Senator Risa.
Salamat, Mr. Chair. Just an additional brief manifestation. On the matter of trust and institutions, paalala lang sa atin na in the Constitution itself, there are well-defined processes to amend the Constitution itself, wide open for congressional and citizen participation. And again, these are also elements of that process of political maturation. Salamat, Mr.
Senator Bato, pagpasensyahan niyo po ako, maglalabas lang ako ng konting sama ng loob sa mga nagaganap sapagkat hindi ko maintindihan kung bakit hirap na hirap ang Senado na mag-imbita ng ibang sekretary. Marami po tayong inimbitahan. Nandiyan po ang sa DOE, inimbitahan din po natin ang kung meron silang maipapadala sa NEDA. Hindi ko po alam sapagkat itong konstitusyon na ito kasing konstitusyon natin ngayon sa 1987. Ang sinasabi nito, merong balancing kapangyarihan ang legislative at ang executive. Ibig sabihin, pantay tayo ng kapangyarihan. Kapag ka iniimbita sana itong mga tiga-executive, sana po ay pagbibigyan nyo kami. Sapagkat hindi naman po kami dito mga marites o parites. Yung pong aming gusto naming ayin kasama po kayo ay patungkol po sa konstitusyon. At itong bagay na ito ay hindi po ito isang bagay na isinasantabi. Sapagkat saligang batas po ito. Kaya po dito na naman pumapasok na kahit anong gusto kong gawin na pumantay dyan sa 1987 Constitution, sumasama ang loob ko. Kaya ang nangyayari, ipinipilit kong baguhin natin ito. Kasi kung ganito ang sistema, na para tayo nagmamakaawa dito sa executive, para makasama lang natin, sana mag-parliamentary na lang tayo. Dahil sa parliamentary, obligado silang humarap at iisa na ang executive at ang legislative. At bawat linggo, nandyan sila sa harap natin, pwede natin silang questionin. Pwede natin silang makapanayam ng magandang usapan. Napakahirap yung ganito. Susulatan lang nila tayo.
I think some of our resource persons took the health break as a permanent break.
Speaking of which,
Go
actually,
ahead. That's the reason.
my
So
first-
we still have very good resource persons here
Opo.
in the person of our economic agencies. Go ahead, ma'am.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Actually, yung una kong tanong sana kay Justice Carpio, but maybe for the next hearing if he will be with us.
If you can send him your questions, ma'am, or if you wish.
Salamat, Chair. Siguro, on the legitimacy of the need for RBH 6, I was going to ask this to Sec Balisacan, but after hearing the presentation of Dr. Angeles, sir, if I could ask this question of you. In 2019, a deputy ombudsman said that, estimated that we lose 700 billion pesos or 20% of government's budget to what are stolen, no, from the coffers of government of the country due to corruption. And based on the Corruption Perceptions Index, we're still in the top third, the Philippines, of the most corrupt countries in the world. And in many other studies on corruption, that corruption is still a big deterrent on foreign direct investment. So, hindi kaya mas importanteng pagtuunan ito ng pansin, combating corruption, even more than amending the Constitution. Salamat po. Mr. Chair, moving on to, if I may, although it's not the specific subject of RBH 6, not one of the, pero I think there are lessons we can learn from just a few questions about energy generation and distribution. So since Yusek Rosemary is here with us, ma'am, if you could field these questions or refer to one of your colleagues from NEDA for these. In the energy transmission and distribution sector for electricity, 40% is owned by the State Grid Corporation of China. And our Senate Committee on Energy learned that they have a veto power because of this 40% ownership in the NGCP. Same goes for Meralco, 43% is owned by foreign interests. So, and we know that Meralco and NGCP are not lacking for profits, and these profits can be invested so that we don't anymore suffer the blackouts also mentioned by our resource persons recently on Panay Island, on Guimaras Island as well, before that on Mindoro Island. And so that we can modernize our grid and make it even more ready and capable for the entry of renewable energy supplies in the coming years. So, mas bibilis po ba yung pagbagsak ng presyo ng kuryente? Mas maaasahan ba natin yung pagkakaroon ng no blackout, renewable energy ready na grid at saka distribution system? At mas titibay din ba tayo laban sa mga cyber threats kung mas maraming dayuhan ang magpapasok ng kapital o kung yung China State Grid Corporation mismo at yung Salim Group ang magiging controlling shareholders sa dalawang kumpanyang iyon, NGCP at saka Meralco?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'm not an engineer, so and just
If the NEDA has any thoughts about these
Yeah, yeah.
questions,
No, just
not
to
on the
say-
technical level, but
Yes,
more
yes.
of the policy level.
yeah, more on the policy level, I think as with any reform, no, kailangan kompleto talaga. So with respect to the reform in the power sector, what we have been pushing for as well is improve the capacity of the ERC, the Energy Regulatory Commission, kasi sila yung dapat na nagsa-safeguard ng ating interest. At the same time, kung sa ICT, so it's your NTC. And this is also why we also mentioned that as we're going digital, we really need to beef up our capacity to do cybersecurity. And a big part of that is really our human resource. So kailangan nating mag-produce ng more than halos 200,000 dapat na license na cybersecurity, of which we only have less than 200, I believe. So ganung tipo na it doesn't have to be just one bullet addressing all the problems, dapat marami tayong kasi iba-iba yung problema. So just to say that yun nga, we really need to beef up the capacity of the regulators themselves. As to the other points, Madam Chair, I will just relay it to my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Yusek Rosemary. Before I continue with my questions for NEDA, dahil nabanggit na rin po yung cybersecurity, if Mr. Chair could ask the representative from the DICT, I think Asik Paraiso. Yes, sir. Ngayon pa lang po, so many vulnerabilities are emerging as to our cybersecurity. Witness the recent cyber attacks. Hindi po ba nangangamba yung department na yung pagbukas sa dayuhan ng public utilities, pati posibleng critical infrastructure, and I have other questions about this for other resource persons, hindi kaya nakakapangamba na magdadala ng dagdag na panganib sa national security natin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, there's always that possibility. There's always that fear. But with the passage and the approval of the President of the National Cybersecurity Plan, comes with it our the improvement and the plan to beef up, as our colleagues were saying, the cybersecurity capacity and posturing of our nation. At the heart of it is, as mentioned, is the upskilling and training of various cybersecurity and IT professionals in government. Hopefully, we can also address the need to meet the disparity of wages in government employees working as cybersecurity professionals and IT professionals. But to answer the question, there's always that possibility. But again, the DICT in particular is not lacking in foresight when it comes to addressing, knowing the problem and trying to address it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And then filling up the plantilla that Yusek Rosemary mentioned, 200,000 personnel for our cybersecurity. Wouldn't it be the better part of wisdom na the ownership remains in Filipino hands?
We would like to. We can only address the problem of the lack of cybersecurity professionals, Your Honors, Mr. Chair. But the wisdom of whether those industries should belong in Filipino hands, even if it would create the possibility of cybersecurity threats, we leave it up to the legislature and the other agencies in government whether that possibility or that risk is greater than the investments and the benefits it would bring to the Filipino people. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Salamat. Of course, Congress always appreciates the kind of respect for the institution, pero kaya rin po kayo iniimbita bilang resource persons because we also value the input you give us. And I'm sure and I hope that the good secretary is also advising the President about this dahil ngayon pa lang na kapapasalang pa lang nga ng National Cybersecurity Plan, namumroblema na nga tayo sa mga cyber attacks na iyan. So all the more moving forward, we want to not just address reactively but even anticipate or preempt additional threats in the future. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Rest assured, Mr. Chair, you have a very progressive, very forward-looking head of the DICT advising the President on matters of cybersecurity, the problem it poses, and the solutions that we can adopt to address those problems. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Going back now to NEDA, it's been, as some of our resource persons have mentioned, it's been more than 2 decades that our power generation sector in the country has been open for 100% foreign ownership. So ano po kaya yung pumipigil pa sa dayuhang kapital na magpundar ng mas maraming kapital sa power generation sector natin nitong nakaraang 2 dekada? If Yusek Rosemary or one of her colleagues would care to address the question.
Chair, if I may.
Yes, please.
I think the most common reason is again stated by our representatives from the Joint Chambers of Commerce, the permitting process. It takes a really, really long time to get the permits off the ground. In fact, there was an effort on the part of the Department of Energy to establish an energy virtual one-stop shop so that all permits will be there. But despite that, there is an executive order to that effect. Despite that, it still takes a long time, Madam Chair.
Thank you, sir, for reiterating a factor also mentioned earlier in our hearing. And I think it will also aid us when we finally assess and possibly update the APIRA, or our various laws regulating the energy sector. My next question, Mr. Chair, is originally addressed to originally prepared to address it to NEDAP, but pwede ko rin po sanang itanong sa BOI. I believe we have a resource person from BOI here with us today, or also Yusek Fita. Tama po ba na kahit nag-register na ang napakaraming renewable energy proponents sa Board of Investments nitong, nung nakaraang 2023, ay maaring hindi pa rin matuloy ang investments na iyan? It's too bad Mr. Francisco is no longer here. Pero tinanong ko po ito dahil binanggit nila kanina ni Mr. Francisco ng BDO Capital, presidente ng BDO Capital, na mahihirapan silang magpautang pala sa mga RE companies kung tulad ngayon, wala silang long-term power purchase agreements sa mga distribution utilities gaya ng Meralco. So how would BOI or Yusek Fita advise that we approach and begin to solve this problem and meet the banking sector halfway and give the support to our RE proponents that they deserve and that we as electricity consumers are hoping for? Would the BOI like to take this question, Mr. Chair?
Very energy specific kasi yung question, but anyone who
Okay.
wishes, please feel free to answer the question, Senator Risa.
True, Mr. Chair, it's very energy
Mr.
specific.
Chair.
But, just
Yeah.
wondering if BOI might have an idea about it kasi may kinalaman sa, kumbaga, yung mga RE investors ang star ngayon ng mga bagong pumapasok na investments. Pero if the banks won't be encouraged to provide them financing, paano ba to? How do we not miss this opportunity?
Mr. Chair?
Yes,
Yeah.
Yusek
Oh,
Rose.
well, not addressing this one. Pero yung
Alala ko yung klase namin, yung walang may gustong sumagot.
So just to say na just to add to the problem of the permitting process, it's also related to the capacity of the ERC kasi isa sila sa bottleneck talaga yung pag-approve ng mga proposals for this power plant projects. So it really has, especially as the economy grows, dadami itong mga ganitong proposals, and so we really need to beef up the capacity of ERC. Yun lang po, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Sorry with your indulgence, Senator Risa. Pero wala ba sa Philippine Development Plan yung streamlining of procedures and processes? Is that there in the
Yes. I think it's to do with the number of mga, I don't know, skilled personnel. I may be
and also sa PISAC sana, sa private sector advisory council, kasi I know they meet directly with the president, and then a lot of their recommendations have been already implemented or in the process of implementation, like NAIA, etc. So yung mga yun, very urgent yung mga very, kumbaga, makakatulong talaga sa pag-akit ng mga investor, di ba? So why don't we put it there sana, aside from the development plan, pati sa PISAC agenda. That's my suggestion. Thank you, Senator Risa.
Salamat, Mr. Chair. I'm wondering if BOI Governor Ramos Samaniego would like to just share some thoughts about my question. Sayang kasi di ba? Dami nang pumapasok na RE investors, RE companies. Sila nga yung majority ng mga bagong investments natin recently. Sa inyo po, sa Board of Investments. But the banks have started to tell us some of their difficulties. So how do we, kumbaga, put the synapses in this subset of the brain together?
Thank you, Senator Risa. Essentially, it's a bilateral long-term supply contract, so it's more of a grid issue, Senator Risa. But what the BOI is doing is, if they're registered with the BOI, what we do is we suspend their commercial operation. And as I'm saying this, Mr. Chair, we have this Executive Order number 18 where we facilitate all of the permits and licenses for projects that are categorized as strategic industries. And it's true, last year, Mr. Chairman, we have like 937 billion worth of investment from RE. And as we're speaking right now, we are actually working out all of these
Dollars, ma'am.
permitting.
Dollars po yun, Governor.
937, no, pesos.
Pesos.
Sir. But that was just like from June to February. So it's really, we really have, when we opened the RE, through the IRR actually, that was the time that there was this onslaught of in all of these RE projects. And within that period, we have that much investments in RE, which include as well FDIs. But on this, ma'am, what we are doing is through the EO18, we're looking at each and every permit, and we're looking at all of these areas of concern para i-address. Normally, ma'am, but this long-term power supply agreement is bilateral in nature. So what we could do is we can just encourage the parties on how we can unbundle this issue Madam Senator. It's more of a grid issue. Right now, we have also in our recent meeting, also with the EVOS, that's the one that there's this energy online one-stop shop as well. We also met with NGCP, where we are now made aware that all the queues on this, all of this queuing would now be done by sometime April. So all of this, ma'am, tinitignan na po namin isa-isa through the EO18, all of these issues and concerns on how we can facilitate the operation, actually, not just permitting, but eventually the commercial operation of the projects, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Maraming salamat din, Attorney Governor Ramos Samaniego. And of course, Mr. Chair, I also listened to what Yusek Rosemary has repeatedly said na importante din yung papel ng ERC at yung upgrade ng capacity niya, also to facilitate these essential connections like the long-term power purchase agreements. Mr. Chair, I think Yusek Rosemary is raising her hand to interject.
Yes, Yusek Rose. Before you answer, Yusek Rose, I might forget I wanted to ask this, kanina ko pa gustong hingin. Kasi nag-release ng PR ang PCOO kahapon na 12 billion dollars or pesos of the pledges have materialized. So could I get details on that, please? Because that's a very impressive number. We'd like to know the details, what industries, what corporations, etc. and so forth. So since we will take advantage of your presence to request that, please, before the next hearing. Thank you. The next hearing is next week. Thank you. Thank you, Senrisa.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Chair.
Chair.
Papasa load to kay March. But anyway, no, just to say for the record as well na, as per press release din ng ERC, they only have 272 plantilla positions, and they're supposed to do the processing of all these applications in addition to monitoring the performance then. So we really need to address the I also know that they had a large cut in their budget yata. So yeah, so it has to be, like I said, a system-wide approach for this one. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, the chair happens to be also the chair of our committee that passes the budget.
But I don't handle ERC. It's Senator Gatchalian who handles it.
That's true, Mr. Chair.
ERC.
Also,
Nung sinabi yun, nag-walk out yung staff ni Senator Gatchalian. Hindi, joke lang. Baka pinatawag ko.
in fact, I remember, Mr. Chair, that the committee, as led by the Vice Chair, Sen. Sherwin, and this representation, we restored the budget of the ERC. So what Yusek Rosemary has been saying, we'll find support. We'll continue to find support here in the Senate for
I think what
capacity.
traditionally Senator Gatchalian, who's been handling the subcommittee of the Committee on Finance, handling the energy agencies, he just juggles it. He doesn't. In fact, he adds to it. But he realigns the budget where he sees fit. So if he thinks he doesn't take it out of the DOE family, is what I'm trying to say. No, just in his defense. Kasi wala po siya dito. So.
And I
Go
confirm
ahead.
that, Mr. Chair. So just a last question for NEDA on the energy generation and distribution. So kasi nga napakaseryosong usapin po itong supply ng kuryente. Kung wala to, of course, wala ang manufacturing sector na inaasahang magbibigay ng empleo sa mga mawawala ng trabaho sa sektor ng agrikultura na patuloy na gumagamit na ng mga makina. Alam na ng mga bansang gaya ng Vietnam, which we've been talking about a lot, na ang susi para pumasok ang foreign investors sa manufacturing sector ay ang supply ng mura, sapat at maasahang kuryente. So, given these so far, Yusek Rosemary, hindi kaya ang pag-amyenda sa EPIRA law ang dapat nating inaatupag sa halip na ang tsatsya? Any thought on that, ma'am?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I have to beg your indulgence, and we'll just get back to you. I'll ask my colleague to give his comment on that. Thank you.
Your colleague, ma'am, meaning Director General Balisacan?
Yeah, and Yusek Dokoy. Yusek Capuno.
Senrisa, what was the question? We missed the question.
I was just wrapping up that napaka-importante yung mga usaping kuryente. So, hindi kaya amyandahan na lang natin yung EPIRA sa halip na amyandahan ng konstitusyon. Maybe the Philippine Development Plan even had some points about that.
Comments there from the resource persons?
She said that the good Yusek said she would ask Director General Balisacan.
Anything on the development plan regarding EPIRA? Or you take that as also as a initial condition? Yeah, please speak in the mic, Yusek Rose.
It's in the legislative agenda.
Meron ho doon?
Yes.
To amend EPIRA. Okay. So we'll just ask for details maybe, Senrisa.
Thank you, Chair. It's good to know that it's on the LEDAC priority legislative agenda. At least probably 2 years before this whole idea of amending the Constitution came up. Chair, I think Yusek Fita is also raising her hand. to
Yes, yes,
interject.
of course. Yusek Fita and anyone for that matter after her could offer a response. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Senator Risa. Actually, I was raising my hand to go back to the PPA question that was raised by Senator Risa a while ago. But I believe as well that we need to review the EPIRA. There's so many things, so many developments that have transpired since the time it was passed, and hence there have been certain issues that would merit amendments to the EPIRA. But Senator Risa, Mr. Chair, on the PPAs, of course, these are crucial for us to secure the financial viability of energy projects as they guarantee a market for the electricity generated and providing a steady revenue stream for investors. However, there have been a lot of challenges, as earlier pointed out, and there are certain measures that we need to focus our efforts on, particularly in terms of strengthening our policy and regulatory frameworks. We need more clear regulatory guidelines, and incentives for RE would also be we need to continue because there are already incentives in place, tax breaks, feed-in tariff, subsidies, and we hope to be able to sustain these incentives for RE and enhancing the financial models in order for us to address the risks. Some risk mitigation instruments would need to be developed, along with some certain flexible pricing structures that could be put in place, or for now probably they need to be studied in order for us to see how this could be implemented given our current context, and promoting more public-private partnerships, fostering collaboration between the public and private sectors to share risks and benefits, capacity building, enhancing the capacity of our LGUs and utilities to negotiate and manage PPAs, ensuring they are structured to attract investors while serving public interests, and improving market access and infrastructure by way of developing or establishing grid infrastructure investments that would ensure that the generated power can be effectively distributed and sold, and hence enhancing the attractiveness of PPAs, and then also open access policies and encouraging innovation and technology adoption. For instance, the support for emerging technologies and digital platforms for PPA transactions. And we have some startups, by the way, who are already creating these digital platforms for electricity, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Yusek Fita. Very much appreciated the several concrete input that will guide not only that will guide us not only in this hearing but also dun sa gagawin naming hopefully proseso ng pagbabalik tingin sa EPIRA moving forward. So right now, Mr. Chair, klaro there are maybe a million things we can do now. Halimbawa, ayusin yung permitting process, identifying deterrents for industries that are already liberalized, nang hindi kailangan ang chacha. Do I still have time in this round for another topic, Mr. Chair?
You've used up 11 minutes, so
Mr. Chair, I'll wait for the next
I'll ask Senator Bato if he wishes to ask questions.
Yeah, I'll
Mr. Chair,
wait,
may
Mr.
But I
Chair.
think
Salamat, Mr.
I think usually Senator Bato is very fast, so we can go back
Okay,
to
thank you,
afterwards.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Bato, yeah, with your permission, Senator Risa.
I just only have one question, Mr. Chair. Thank you. One question lang. Sorry for, I am late. Hindi ko narinig lahat ng mga session ng mga ahensya nandito. I just would like to get the recapitulation of their positions. Can I request, Mr. Chair, or we still have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 resource persons around. Can I see a raising of hands? Who among you, based on your agency's position, who among you are in favor of amending the restrictive provisions of our economic provisions of our Constitution? Can I see a raising of hands? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
No one on the
So,
private side, just the government side.
Government side, 6.
Are you asking also just to clarify, Senator Bato, kasama ba yung, are they also,
Ito, 10.
they're also part of the survey? Yeah,
Yes.
you're part of the survey, so you have the option to abstain if you wish.
Yeah. Gusto ko lang malaman.
Okay,
mag-isip
yes,
lang ako.
can we ask for the raising of hands again, sir?
Raising of hands?
Yeah, please.
1, 2,
Mr.
3,
Chairman.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So, 8.
Mr. Chairman, I abstain. I think for a foreigner, this would be a very difficult thing to do. Thank you.
I understand. You've made your position clear, Mr. Pay. Thank you.
Thank you. So, 8, 2. Yun lang, Mr. Chair. Maraming salamat. Thank you.
Ang galing nung tanong mo, Senator Bato.
Mr. Chair.
Dahil late ako dumating. Kaya gusto ko
4 na oras kami nakaraupo dito eh. Ikaw in a few minutes na tanong mo kagad.
That's the purpose of our hearing, di ba?
Kaya,
Thank you. Salamat.
Thank you, sir. Thank you,
Mr.
sir.
Chair.
Oh,
Mr.
ang galing, ang galing. Back to Senator Reese.
Mr. Chair.
Sorry. Senator Reese, I've been informed by my staff, si Dr. Doy Santos has been raising his hand for quite some time. With your permission, we'll just ask him if he wants to contribute. Might be on the subject matter at hand. Go ahead, Dr. Santos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, senators. In response,
We can't hear you, sir. Could you speak a little louder? Sorry.
How's that, Mr. Chair? Can you
I
hear me
understand
now?
you've been raising your hand. You wanted to contribute to the
Yes, I
discussion.
have. Yes, sir.
Yeah, go
Yes,
ahead, sir. Go ahead.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Much better now. Much better.
Okay. So in response to the Honorable Madam Senator's question, I would like to share the emerging practices now from my state, where I'm based now in South Australia, where the power prices used to be the most expensive in the nation. It has now gone to the cheapest. And a lot of that has gotten to do with the fact that we made a transition into renewables earlier. And at one point, there was even a major blackout because the grid connection to Victoria was cut during a storm. And then Elon Musk came in, and there was an agreement to build batteries, so 100 megawatts. That's what he did in 90 days. And so one of the things that came out of that was that battery storage is not only power generation, but it helped to stabilize the grid by providing ancillary services, and in fact helped lower the cost, because when you have variable generation and it varies during the day, the task of the grid is to maintain parity between supply and demand. So the battery storage was thought to help in prevent blackouts by supplying energy. The utility derived from that 100 million investment was that it helped to stabilize the grid, because you're talking here about microseconds rather than minutes to balance the influx, and it has resulted in that lower power. And then the other thing is that microgrids. So earlier it was highlighted that a lot of the investments are off the grid. So in fact, as I mentioned earlier in my statement, that most of these projects are remote from the grid, but are actually closer to the consumer. So it can provide to households in the locality. But then if you're going to set up a microgrid, then you're no longer engaged in power generation. You are now engaged in power distribution. So these are the emerging, and then there are these platforms, as was mentioned earlier by the USEC. And then lastly, there's the ASEAN grid, where actually Australia, in my home state, they're producing solar commercials at a commercial scale to feed into Singapore through undersea cables via Indonesia. And so there is a plan by the ASEAN group of countries to connect ASEAN. So in fact, if you're talking about foreign power, that means that the power, when there's a deficit in the Philippines and there's cheaper power elsewhere, it could help meet our demand. But then you're talking that the power generators are completely foreign, right? But then, of course, there needs to be a connection. There needs to be a grid connection. And all this renewable, we are aiming for 50% renewable by 2035. If we have to wait for all those permitting and things like that, the 200 signatures or so that are needed, are we going to meet that target? Are we going to do it in a stable manner? Because flexibility is needed, but also stability. And so I submit, Mr. Chair, that the technical know-how, the capabilities, the innovation, for that to be diffused, it's all happening in the major centers of powerhouses of the world. For that to diffuse to the Philippines, we need to be more open. And so if we were to just simply amend the PSA Act and include grid distribution and transfer, how thin are we going to slice that provision? Because sooner or later, EVs will come into the picture. So then are you going to include public utility vehicles? How thin are you going to keep slicing that ham until there's no longer any ham left? So it might be better, Mr. Chair, that we consider the proposal at hand that you have laid before the table through the RPH6. Thank you, Your Honors. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very useful information. And in a way, it makes us sad because Australia is going to connect to Singapore, but tayo, yung connection lang sa grid, di natin magawa-gawa. Connection of Visayas and Mindanao to the grid, di natin magawa-gawa for so many years already. That's really sad, actually. I wish the government could really push on that connection, because that's leaving a lot of power, what's the word, stranded or not available to those who need it. Yeah. Senator Risa? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I also appreciate the inputs of Dr. Ocampo. And not just sad, pero provocative, like this ASEAN grid. Malay ba natin kaya nating humabol dyan? And again, not solely through the Chacha route. For example, if I'm just thinking aloud here, if we were to amend existing laws, including the EPIRA, and acting together, they could create those connections that are needed. So just something to think about as we move forward, conducting these hearings, of course, also in aid of legislation. So maraming salamat para dyan, sir. Sige, on the Public Service Act naman, if Yusek Rosemary will bear with me, I'd like to pose these questions to NEDA as well. So under the Public Service Act, NEDA can recommend the classification of a public service as a critical infrastructure. So ano-ano po yung mga public services na ngayon kino-consider na critical infrastructures?
Yeah, Madam Chair. Right now we're just looking at it's the telecoms industry that is still identified in the law and in the IRR. We are actually requesting for a TA on this because we are supposed to come up also with a baseline survey, and so we are requesting for a TA from World Bank on which to base actually yung define ng ano yung gagawin ng public utilities. Thank you.
So sa ngayon, prior the baseline survey, meron na ba kayong inirekomenda, I mean ang NEDA, na iba pang public services for classification as critical infrastructures?
None yet, Madam Chair. Mr. Chair.
Alright. Salamat, ma'am. I'm asking this also because kasama po ni dating Senator at ngayon Secretary Ralph Recto at ni dating Senador Kiko Pangilinan. Actually, kumontra po ako sa Public Service Act amendments dahil sa tingin ko yung telecommunications, airports, at mga tren at riles dapat manatiling public utilities na hindi mapapasailalim sa kontrol ng dayuhan. Pero sa huli, so ipinasa ang RA 11659 para palawakin ang public services na pwedeng pasukin ng dayuhan. Pero pagkatapos ng maraming debate, nilinaw ng batas yung kakaibang pagtrato sa critical infrastructure na sa tingin ko po nararapat lang. So dito, bawal magmay-ari ang anumang entity na kontrolado o kumikilos para sa dayuhang gobyerno o foreign state-owned enterprise. And I remember that our good chair himself, Sen. Sonny, even interpellated the sponsor on this specific point. And if I remember correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, his concern then was on the law effectively allowing China to own and take control of Dito Telecom. But according to our good chair of that bill, now law, may additional safeguards sa telecoms industry dahil tinuturing nga itong critical infrastructure. So that. Ngayon, ang legislatura, so parehong sa Senado at saka sa House of Representatives, kinilala yung pangangailangang protektahan ang critical infrastructure. So sa RBH 6, sa tingin ng NEDA, tama po ba na wala nang ganitong distinction? Wala nang ganitong protection sa critical infrastructure?
Actually, no. National security is really an issue that we should really take very seriously. And so, kaya nandun pa rin talaga yung mga, kumbaga yung protection na yun, really looking at the security review. So that's part of it. Meron na actually guidelines para doon. All those other safeguards with respect to information, kukuha sila ng yung parang ISO na certification and all that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
At ngayon lumalalim yung hidwaan sa pagitan ng mga bansa, mas nagiging konkreto yung mga banta sa cybersecurity natin. 'Di ba? Mas mahalaga pa nga na protektahan yung national security natin.
Yes, of course. But like I said, actually yung issue of cybersecurity, nandiyan talaga siya, no? Regardless of course, like you said, with the geopolitical tension, mas prominent siya. But just the same, we really need to beef up our capacity to guard against cyber attacks.
Salamat, Yusek. So I think one thing that's affirmed to me dito sa recent exchange natin, kailangan explicit, even for those who support RBH 6, na merong pa ring pagkakaiba yung mga ituturing na critical infrastructure. Hindi sila kapareho lang ng iba na pwede lang buksan sa 100% foreign ownership dahil nga critical infrastructure sila. So isang halimbawa lang before I leave this topic. Napabalita na mayroon ng 3 prospective winning bidders yung 170.6 billion peso na iya privatization. Sa pagkakaalam ko, all of the 3 bidders have foreign partners based on existing cap on foreign equity ownership. Pero sa amended Public Service Act natin ay iniwan sa diskresyon ng Pangulo ng Pilipinas kung alin sa natitira pang public services ang itatalaga nito na critical infrastructure. So sa RBH 6 po ba, nakikita nyo ba na may plano na nating itodo bukas sa foreign ownership ang lahat at alisin na ang naiwang diskresyon sa Pangulo sa bagay na ito?
I think the issue of security, national security for that matter, is, you know, it's really parang overarching consideration naman to. Parang regardless of whether we go by the RBH 6 or not, nandiyan lagi yung consideration for national security.
So again, dapat explicit na mayroong pa ring discretion ang presidente to determine which are critical infrastructures and therefore not subject to total opening to foreign ownership.
I think, Madam Chair, if the language of the law is yung ilalagay lang yung unless otherwise provided for by law, and our current legal framework is the amended Foreign Investment Act and then the amendment Public Service Act, nakalagay naman yun doon. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Binabalikan ko lang po itong issue, Mr. Chair, kasi maalala natin nung nagkaroon ng shutdown sa airport nung nakaraang New Year at saka Labor Day, sinabi ko na hindi silver bullet yung solution na privatization dahil ang nakita kong mas problema dito ay kapabayaan, hindi lack of funds o opportunities para sa modernization. NAIA actually generates an annual operating income of at least 15 billion pesos. This was pre-pandemic, of course, 2019. At nakakabawi rin ito ngayon. Unfortunately, very little is left with MIAA for operations, as 50% or more of its net income is remitted to the National Treasury, on top of the 20% national government share in the authority's operating income based on actual collections. Kaya hirap ang MIAA sa sariling upgrading at modernization. And according to the Workers' Union, Mr. Chair, the Samahan ng mga Manggagawa sa Paliparan ng Pilipinas or SMPP, 5 to 7% na lang ang budget para sa maintenance every year. Hindi parang kahawig-halos ito ng Transco na kumikita naman ng 20 billion pesos kada taon pero ipinamigay natin sa lokal at dayuhang konsorsyum ng NGCP para patakbuhin at pagkitaan. So sana does NEDA have any thought about that? What we did to Transco in this whole privatization process?
Baka si Yusek ba yun eh? No, just to say that in the amended Foreign Investment, Public Service Act, there actually is a provision for yung performance requirement, monitoring by the regulator. So merong mga performance parameters, and parang on this basis, merong I believe may sanction na nandun. I just forgot kung ano yung nilagay doon na sanction. Pero kasama yun sa safeguard. With respect to Transco, I'm not privy to that info unless Yusek Agabi.
Would Yusek Agabin care to comment on this, Mr. Chair?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the question, Madam Chair.
I was wondering about how Transco was handled. Speaking of performance requirements, kung in terms of its financial performance, it was profiting 20 billion pesos every year, but we turned it over to the NGCP consortium. And in terms of performance requirements, I don't know how well the NGCP is acting as a
yung aking medyo pagpasensyahan lang niyo ako mga kasama ko kasi talagang napakasensitibo. Unang-una, tingnan nyo, napakaganda ng itsura namin dito. Ako nasa majority, nandito ang aking hinahangaan, nasa minority. Napaka-interesadong kami dito sa usapin na ito. Yung inaantay namin, mambihira, oo. Sana magbigay po kayo ng interest dahil lang ang bill din na pag-uusapan po natin dito ay galing din kay Win Gatchalian, kay Senator Win Gatchalian na nasa majority din. Kaya ang akala ko, kaalyado natin itong mga nasa executive. Kung kaalyado namin talaga kayo, siputin nyo kami. Pambihira, oo. Napakahirap po ng sitwasyon natin. Gusto natin bumalanse, pero kung ganyan naman ang maaabutan namin dito, mag-parliamentary na ho tayo. Wala na ho akong pag-uusapan dito, kundi mag-parliamentary na tayo. Para harap-harapan tayo. Ang hirap ng ganito, taguan eh. Hindi ako sanay sa taguan. Baka sir, gusto niyo pong magsalita para lumabig lang ng konti ang sitwasyon.
Maganda pa yung sinabi niyo, Mr. Chairman. Tsaka mabuti nandito rin si Senator De La Rosa kahit online. Na-witness namin kahapon yung yung init ng ulo ng isa pang chairman natin sa Agriculture Committee na halos hindi umusad yung hearing kasi sa galit na galit nga siya sa reports ng mga heads of the agencies to implement laws. So andun din si Senator Padilla kahapon eh. Alam ko katabi niya si Chairperson Villar eh. Which, yung ganung situation could really be, hindi ko sinasabing panacea, no, nasagot lahat ng problema, but improved by the parliamentary system being mentioned by our chairman. Kasi yung head of agency, head of the department, implementing the laws passed by the parliament or legislature belongs to the parliament in a parliamentary system. Therefore, una sa lahat, he could have been the nominee of the majority group in the parliament. Therefore, the head of the department or government agency shares in the wisdom, in the philosophy of the law and programs and activities authorized by Parliament. So yun na yun, wala nang, you share it eh. That's why you get appointed to it. Therefore, your mission is to implement it. Yan po ang nakikita ko rin benefits ng parliamentary system. The merging or fusion of legislative and executive powers. May ganun, may nag-overlap po sila. So unlike now, nakikita natin purely presidential tayo, appointed by the executive branch. It's as if it's as if they're also a compartment na ito amin ha, dito kayo. So we create laws, they do not implement it. We are the failure. The legislature is the failure. Hindi kayo nararamdaman ng taong bayan. Ang ginagawa nyo, hindi namin nararamdaman. Totoo, kasi tayo naman, tuturo natin ng executive. Hindi nila kasi ina-implement eh. While in a parliamentary system, walang takas. It's the government of the day which is determined by the majority in parliament. So ang sabihin ng taong bayan, hindi namin nararamdaman ang programa ninyo because mali ang wisdom ninyo, mali ang priorities ninyo, or palpak kayong mga majority in the legislature. Therefore, we demand elections to change you. Ganun po yun. So, actually, I agree with you, Mr. Chairman. Wala akong problema sa parliamentary system. I think it's better for the Philippine culture then. Yung flexibility, we can make a mistake in an election and we can correct it after 2 years down the road. 2 to 3 years down the road, we can correct it in a parliamentary system. Pwede nga 1 year down the road. So, ganun po yun. Yun po yung nakikita kong benefit po sa Republika ng Pilipinas if we adopt a parliamentary system. Ibang usapan naman yan sa federal because federal is central national relationship with regional states. So, but parliamentary is the fusion of or the sharing of powers between legislative and executive. At saka, ito na yung totoo na when you call the Congress as the representatives of the people, yun ang totoo sa parliamentary. Yun ang totoo. Kasi, di ba, even the executive branch is determined by the legislative will and the members of the legislature are representatives of the people. So, mas maganda po yun, Mr. Chairman. So, I agree with you. Concentrate. We also concentrate on a proposal to adopt a parliamentary form of government. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Maraming salamat po, Senator Pimentel. Napakaganda po nung pagkakapaliwanag. Yan po ang ating bar top notcher. Napakasarap pakinggan. Maraming salamat po. Atin po ngayon medyo humupa na po ang aming mga, hindi naman po yan galit, kundi hinaing. Hinaing po. At gusto lamang po naming mas mapaliwanagan ang ating mga kababayan na pantay lang po ang kapangyarihan ng legislative at ng executive. Wala pong mas mataas dito. Tama po yung sinabi ni Senator Coco Pimentel at ni Senator Bato at ni Senator Tolentino na hindi po kami bata-bata ng sinuman. Hindi po kami tita ng sinuman dito. Kami po ay nagtatrabaho At yung susundan ko lang po yung sinabi ni Senator Coco na alam niyo po, napakadami pong napakagandang batas. Lalong-lalo na po yan yung patungkol sa agrikultura. At kahapon, narinig ko po lahat yung napakagandang batas na yon na hindi po nai-implement. Hindi po nagagawa. Hindi po kasalanan yan ng mga senador o mga congressman. Kasalanan na po yan ng executive. Yung mga hindi po nakaka-perform. Bilyon-bilyon po pondo ng para sa mga magsasaka. Pero hindi po nagagawa. Hindi natin malaman kung anong problema ng mga tao dyan sa executive. Kung gusto nyo ng silipan, maghapon tayo magsilipan kung gusto niyo. Tapos, sasabihin sa akin ng mga tao sa paligid, ganito gawin mo, gumanti ka. Kausapin mo yung mga nasa commission and appointments. Pagdating sa budget, harangin nyo, bigyan mo 0. Hindi naman natin pwedeng gawin yon kasi ang magtatamaan po dyan ay yung taong bayan. Kasi ang prioridad po natin palagi, tandaan po natin, ang taong bayan. Kasi po, kaya naman po tayo nang gagalaiti dito dahil itong Constitutional Amendment and Revision na committee na to, ang nakasalalay po dito ay future ng Pilipinas, hindi po future namin ng mga senador o kung sino man. Ang pinag-uusapan po natin kung tayo ba ay magbabago o hindi. Kung mga ganitong sistema, payag na ba tayo dito o hindi. Yun lang po. Kaya po, pakikinggan na po natin ang ating pong unang bisita. Ma'am, meron pa ba tayong online? Lahat ba ito? Sige po, paki-ano lang. Ma'am, ating secretary, Comsec, paki-acknowledge lang po. Sorry po, ma'am secretary, acknowledge lang po namin. Baka sakaling may nagising po sa ating mga kasabi pong pinakamahalaga na kalihim po natin dahil ang usapin po dito ay seguridad ng ating bansa. Ang ating pong pinakamamahal, Secretary Clarita Carlos. Magandang umaga po.
Thank you very much, Your Honor, Senator Padilla. Just to repeat, if the senator had not invited me, I would have volunteered to come. Mainly because many years ago, starting in 1989, I was already part of a group composed of your father, very good friend, Nene Pimentel, Pepe Abueva, our UP president, and several others who went around the whole archipelago doing political education. Why did I say it was political education? Because we were not really like advocating federal and parliamentary system. We were really laying down the groundwork for a future referendum when the population would be asked in regard to constitutional changes. And so whenever we have these interactions, I would always be the curtain raiser, the first one to introduce the subject area on federalism and parliamentary systems. So what you really need to realize is that a democracy can only work because you have informed citizenry. After all the government authorities come from the people, and I think that is enshrined in our constitution. So anything that the people grants to the government, it can also take away. That is the reason why you have recall, you have impeachment, and the like, so that even if you had been elected by X number of votes, there are also mechanisms by which you may be not elected anymore. And that brings us to the question of why are we revising our constitution? Well, the quick and dirty answer there, I use the term quick and dirty because it's the one we use as social scientist, Senator, to mean that we had very little time and therefore I have to truncate my responses. I know I can deliver a whole session here of my lecture, but I know that there are many other resource persons. And I hope you will invite me another time so we can continue this conversation on many aspects of the changes that you want undertaken. Structures are very important. Structures are really the institutions within which you envelope or you embrace individuals and groups, and the structures will define the limits to action. They will define the floor and they will define the ceiling, the bottom and the top, so that an individual, when given a particular structure, like if this were a glass, the individual knows that it can only work within the structure of the glass, like this cylinder. Like you talk of the leche flan, which can be formed in different configuration. If you form it in an oblong, the milk and the sugar will only work along the edges of the oblong or whatever shape the leche flan will take. That is the nature of structure. Now, if you put warm bodies in structure, then the warm bodies will have to align within the structure. And when they so align within the structure, you invariably change their behavior. So the basic groundwork, Senator, of the changes that you want would really be this philosophical perspective that the structures will result in behavior change. That's the reason why we're revising the Constitution. Because what you have seen from 1987 is that there have been a lot of things that we have done and not done, and we think that a change is in order. And the change can only come from changing the relationship among structures. And I think you hit on one of the major relationship, and that is between the executive and the legislature. Now, people seem to get confused in regard to federal and parliamentary systems. I think you mentioned that already, Senator Pimentel. When you talk of federal systems, you really talk of the relationship between the national government and the subnational units. So when you talk of a parliamentary system, you're talking about the relationship between the executive and the legislature. Okay, what is the difference between a presidential system and a parliamentary system? Siguro, konting kasaysayan. Nag-umpisa ang parliamentary system sa tinatawag na Mother of Parliament, Great Britain. Nagkaroon sila ng bloodless revolution in 1688, where once upon a time, it was the king who declared the law. And I'm sure you remember the Divine Rights of Kings, Senator Robin. The Divine Rights of Kings simply declares that the kings represent God, and therefore, whatever the king says is law. But they had this glorious revolution, and so they constituted what is called the parliament. The word parliament comes from the French term parler, P-A-R-L-E-R, which means to talk. That's why parliament is a talking environment. You talk. If you zipper your mouth there, I mean, you'll be ousted in the next election because that's why no bobo can be member of parliament, by the way. I'm sorry for the use of the word, but I cannot find any other one which is appropriate. Meaning, somebody who has nothing between his ears will eventually be kicked out of the parliament because he will not be able to converse, he will not be able to exchange views, he will not be able to sustain the question hour, which will happen. I think you mentioned that a while back, because in the question hour, every member of the parliament will be asked, what have you done in agriculture? What have you done in health services? And the like, and will be made accountable for what he has or has not done. So, you know, the beauty of this is just starting to unravel. And I wish this would be a continuing conversation, Senator, so that, you know, this will require many, many sessions, I assure you. Because I'm just truncating my thoughts now. I'm putting them all together, and then maybe later on, I will spell them out in more detail, if not in this session, in some other sessions. All right. What is the other outstanding quality of a parliamentary system? The fundamental principle is parliament is supreme, which means whatever the parliament declares is law. Of course, if you have a dual executive, then the executive, who is a ceremonial executive, will give his or her imprimatur, but that is only pro forma. You recall Queen Elizabeth? Queen Elizabeth will dare not give the royal assent. It is given as a matter of course, because it's been taken away from the royals. They're just there for, I don't know, maybe for decoration, you know, and to for us to gossip about, no, and find out what dresses they're wearing. But if in a parliamentary system, you will have two executives, the one who will be there when your prime minister is kicked out of office and when the government of the day is not there, and therefore you have a president there who will be the bridge towards the next government of the day. I will expand on this later because I have limited time. But yes, Parliament declares today, the next Parliament can repeal. That is how powerful the Parliament is. That is the essence, that is the vortex of the principle of Parliament is supreme. So, any law can be repealed at a later time. Do you recall Great Britain getting out of the European Union? That was a decision of the Conservative Party. The Conservative Party went to the people and said, if you elect the Conservative Party members, we are going to get Britain out of the EU. And the people voted the Conservative Party members. Did they vote for Theresa May, who was the Prime Minister at the time, or Boris Johnson as Premier? No, they voted for these two people as members of Parliament. It only happened that both Theresa May and Boris Johnson were leaders of their political party. And when they constituted the majority in the Parliament, the leader became the Premier. That goes for every other parliamentary system. Whoever is the head of the majority party or a coalition of politics becomes the Premier. And the Premier is the head of government. The President is the Chief of State. All right. The other pluses of parliamentary system, and has been noted by Senator Padilla, is that there is a fusion of the executive and the legislature. You are not electing an executive because the Prime Minister will elect from among the majority party members the heads of his cabinet. If you'll notice, if you've been to Great Britain, or if you've seen it, as they are being videoed, you'll notice that the configuration is something like this, although the walkway is a little bit bigger, maybe double this. That's the reason why there is a term called crossing the aisle, isn't it? Because that is the aisle. If you cross the aisle, you actually change your political color. So let us assume the speaker is there. Whoever is seated to the right of the speaker is the government of the day. You are the premier. I am the shadow government. I am the head of the minority party. At any time you are ousted, we will exchange places. And let us say Senator Pimentel is seated there as the head of housing. Opposite from him would be Professor Monsod, who will be the housing minister, even when your government is ousted. Do you see, even just looking at the parliament in a process, you already have a story there, isn't it? A lot of stories there. The concept of rightists and leftists came from that. Whoever is in the right of the speaker wants to keep the status quo. You want to be the government of the day. The one who is on the left of the speaker wants to change the status quo. We are the shadow government. I want to change you. I want to be the next premier. So, all right. What is the other beautiful part about parliamentary system? There will be no notion of term limits. If you're elected as a member of parliament, you can be elected for as long as you are alive or can continue to discourse in parliament. And you're elected by your electoral district, by the way. If you do not perform, of course, the next time you are not elected. And the best part about that is you don't even need to spend for your election, because it is the political party to which you will plug your umbilical cord, because it will pay for your campaign expenses, your radio and TV time. But beware, if Eric here is a member of the political party, I'll tell him, Eric, bayaran ko yung campaign expenses mo, and radio and TV time mo. Pero kitaw ka, whenever you are in parliament, you got to toe the party line. Which means, if we are, let us say, against abortion, dapat against abortion tayo. Yun ang party line. Kung hindi, tumiwalag ka sa party. You see, party discipline. Kasi hawak ko na siya, ako nagasto sa kanya. Okay? And the other better part of this election is that we're not going through a very torturous, ano ba yun? Parang 3 months na election na naubos na yung salapi mo, hindi pa matapos yung campaign. The usual campaign period is only 2 weeks. After the parliament is dissolved, within 10 to 12 days, meron ka ng bagong parliament. Because you only go to the electoral district and you campaign on the electoral district. You are not campaigning in the whole Great Britain and Northern Ireland. You are campaigning only in your electoral district. So you don't need 3 months to do that. No term limits. There will be no, even political dynasties will be irrelevant. Why? You have political dynasties, and the empirical evidence supports me here. Orion, are you there? I'm sure you can say more about that later. But the reason why you have political dynasties is because you have term limits. You told people that ikaw ganitong taon ka lang pwedeng elect. Sabihin, ang ganda sana ng gagawin ko. Yung kapatid ko si Eric, siya na nga ang aking sunod na mag-elect, mag-campaign. At marami na akong naitanim na mga magagandang mga proyekto. Siyempre, Eric is more likely to be elected. Not so much because we have the same surname, Carlos, but because he just followed through what I earlier started. Why will there be no political dynasties? Which is so antithetical, by the way, to democracy. Because you can only be elected by the electoral district. Never mind that your surname is the same as mine. Do you see? These are really the things that we have to think about. And I think if we're talking about strategic communication, Senator Padilla, this is how we should sell it. No term limits, no political dynasties. These are irrelevant issues in a parliamentary system. Okay, well, I don't know how much more I can go deeply on this, but do I have the time?
Opo.
Okay. All right. What else does the parliamentary system require? It needs a very, very strong bureaucracy. That is the reason why in parliamentary systems you have what is called permanent secretaries, because it's not the case here where when you have a change of administration, you change everybody up to director. Do you know, I wrote a book, by the way, Senator Padilla, on bureaucratic reform. I'll give you copies, no? Sorry sa commercial, ha? Pero doon, nakita ko ang presidente will appoint upwards of 5,000 positions. I'm sure, Senator Pimentel and Padilla, you know that mag-choose nga lang tayo ng 10, nahihirapan tayo. Isipin mo, 5,000 yung papakailaman mo. Every time there is a change in administration. And that's now it's not going to be. In a parliamentary system, only the head of the department, only the head of the ministry will change. And there will be continuing policy because the permanent secretaries will be the ones that will continue the policy. And it's only the direction that the head of the ministry that will direct. Do you see the beauty of all this? The bureaucracy is king in a parliamentary system. That's why when you talk about implementation, never mind that the cabinet secretaries are changing, it's really the bureaucracy under them who will continue under the continuing rules of the game, or the rules of the civil service, or the rules of the bureaucracy. So when we adopt the parliamentary system, all these concomitants we really have to put in together. You cannot adopt them like fragmented, like with all due respect, you cannot revise the constitution piece by piece or fragmented. Let's talk of the constitution like an organism, like a human body. Meron siyang sakit sa kanyang puso, may sakit siya sa kanyang kidney. Wag lang yun ang pakailaman mo. Alaman mo lahat kasi infirmed siya eh. Kasi yung puso niya at saka yung kidney niya, meron siyang relationship, di ba? So hindi mo pwedeng galawin yung economic provisions kasi yung economic provisions, nakatukod siya sa political and social provisions. Hindi ba? So hindi siya pwedeng stand alone. Papalitan mo yung economic. Tapos yung iba hindi mo siya papakailaman. When we are going to revise the Constitution, dapat omnibus ang revision mo. Kasi bawat section doon na papalitan mo, ay meron siya mga pinsan sa other sections. Mag-move lahat siya eh. They will all be moving parts. So, I'm sorry, I apologize if I go against the notion that you can in fact revise the Constitution piecemeal. You can't. Otherwise, we will be wasting our time, and some of the time, we will again revise the Constitution. And we don't like to do that. You know, revising the Constitution is not like suddenly, we scratch our head. Sa Ligang Batas po natin yan. It's the basic law of the land. It is not revised willy-nilly. It's not as if, ganito yung kapritsyo natin ngayon, we change it. No, we don't. We're changing it because we want structural change. We want structural change because we want behavior change. I think I shall conclude at that point. Thank you.
Maraming salamat po sa aming kalihim. Napakaganda po ng inyong pagpapaliwanag, lalong-lalo na po doon sa usapin na magkaharap na yung dalawa. Hindi po nagtataguan. Napakaganda po nun. Kasi yun po ang gusto ng ating mga kababayan, na gusto nila, marinig nila na sa bibig mismo ng mga pinuno nila kung ano yung mga plano nila ng harapan. Hindi po pwede na dadaan pa muna sa media, kanya-kanya munang pagalingan sa media, kanya-kanyang banatan doon, pero hindi naman sila nagkakaharap. Napakaganda po talaga noong harapan na nandiyan yung shadow government, nandoon yung ruling, sige, banatan kayo dyan. Yun po sana ang gusto natin na mangyari para yung ating mga kababayan ay hindi nangangapa. Tungkol naman po doon sa...
May I immediately react to that? Okay, that's a very good point. Because during the question hour, the Prime Minister, in fact, together with Government of the Day, we say Government of the Day because at any day they can be ousted. That's the reason why we use that term. The government, in fact, can stake the life of his government on a question of policy. Policy X, for example. No? And when he stakes the life of his government on a question of policy and he does not get the vote, he will be ousted. That's one other great part about parliamentary system.
Opo, ibig niyo pong sabihin, hindi kailangan ng people power.
No, you don't need people. You just oust him. But, Senator, when...
Kasi nagkaroon na po ng addiction yata ang Pilipino sa people power. Lagi na lang, dapat na tayo sa EDSA. Marami lang tayo ng tao dyan. Sa parliamentary po, hindi na po kailangan yan.
Mayroon po nung role ang rally sa ating liberal democracy. Pero wag ho natin sa kalye gawin ang ating ang mga pagbabago.
Maraming salamat po. Ngayon po, baka may gusto pong...
Umaabot lang naman sa kalye kasi yung protesta pagka walang structure na dadaanan kasi yung grievance yung hinaing ng taong bayan eh. In a parliamentary system, nandun yung structure. May grievance kami, may hinanakit kami sa legislatura, sa parliament. Yung aming problema sa ngayon, hindi nila binibigyan ng tamang atensyon o tamang kilos. Palitan natin sa eleksyon. So, pipressure namin ang aming member of parliament to siguro a vote of no confidence para to dissolve the leadership in the parliament, mapipilitan to call an election. And then hopefully the election will reflect, makita ng eleksyon yung sentimiento ng taong bayan. Kaya importante rin na clean and honest elections dapat. So, tignan natin yung mga bansang yon na talagang pinatibay na nila yung electoral system nila, pinagkakatiwalaan nila ron, at saka walang insentibong mandaya ron because yung taong bayan na mismo ang susuka ka o mandaraya ka sa eleksyon or you will be ostracized and forever remembered. So, sanctity yun. Kasi yun ang paraan eh. Yun ang paraan ng pagbabago eh. So, yun po yun. So, para sa akin, yung parliamentary system reflects the needs of the society at the present time eh. Kasi kung hindi mo sinasagot yun, you do not belong to parliament. You will be ousted in an honest election reflecting the will of the people. Kaya yung mga patago-tago na member of the cabinet or of the government, magiging permanente na yung pagtatago nila kasi hindi na sila magiging member of the government. They will be ousted, di na nga sabi, through an election reflecting the will of the people. Yun po. So marami po itong marami talagang kailangan natin, pagbabagong kailangan gawin. Tapos yun na, since posible yung government of the day matanggal at any time, kailangan may matibay pa rin yung gobyernong naiwan. Kasi meron yatang possibility, Secretary, no, na there's a period of time that there is no government of the day formed yet, nga ganon. So,
That's the reason why you have the ceremonial president to bridge over.
yes, so that's why matibay yung bureaucracy. Kasi even without a head to give the direction for the moment, tuloy ang gobyerno, existing ang gobyerno. So, these are many features, Mr. Chairman, na pagandaan talaga natin lahat ng mga yan. So, thank you po, thank you.
Napakaganda po. Kasi kakapangyari lang po niyan sa UK na kailan lang kay Boris Johnson ba? Boris, di ba? Na nagkaroon sila ng eleksyon, nanalo nga siya, pero ang nangyari, tinatanggal siya Tinatanggal siya, pinag-resign siya dahil medyo may mga iskandalo siyang ginawa, COVID, pero tumutoma-toma siya, nagalit ang tao pinag-resign siya nung nag-eleksyon. Nanalo pa rin siya. Pero nangyari, yung kanyang mga minister nag-resign. Wala siyang nagawa. Natanggal siya, palit siya.
If you will notice there, despite the fact that they ousted Boris Johnson, still the Conservative Party controlled the majority in the House of Commons. And therefore, they chose among themselves the next leader. No? But if the majority party loses its majority, we're talking arithmetic majority, no? Then they go to the country and have an election. Yeah.
Yun ang maganda Sige po, Senator.
Yun po yun. So, kung nakita natin, change is is easier to achieve under a parliamentary system. So, the party controlling the majority of the parliament made a change within. So internal, nagawa nila bago kasi yung face nila ayaw na ng tao. Let's say it's masyadong too costly for the party to maintain that face of the party. Palitan internal. Tapos sinasabi nga sa atin ni Secretary Carlos, kung kailangan silang palitan yung mismong majority, kaya rin. Because bakit papalitan? Nagbago ang sentimiento ng electorate. Hindi na kayo ang representative, tamang representative sa panahon na ito. Maybe sa last election, totoo. Nagbago. So nagbago ang sentimiento namin, papalitan. So, ganun po. So, I mean, napakaganda if we are after a structure which will allow changes in the government to be made easier because the structures make it possible. So, napakaganda. And then kung ganyan nga, you're a member of parliament, you're the persons running the government, parati kang on your toes. So pati yung change in behavior nga sinasabi ni Secretary Carlos, on your toes. Hindi yung katulad kahapon na atake ni Senator Villar na ang tamad nyo, ayaw nyo magtrabaho. O, gano'n. So, change of behavior on your toes parati. Di ba? Kasi kahapon, ma'am, ang excuse na nabibigay, we are a member of the board. The board, this is the board decision. We need approvals, 2 to 3 levels of approvals. Ganun yung kahapon na excuses na nabibigay. So, you are not on your toes. In effect, kung tutuusin, the whole structure is not on your toes kasi you can tuturo ipasa mo yung bola pasa mo yung blame which is also lumalabas doon sa ating blue ribbon kay Senator Tolentino na excuses din, pasa rin ng bola. Gusto nga niya manood daw ng Gilas, nag-investigate siya ng blue ribbon, nakapanood din siya ng basketball game. Kasi anong napanood niya? Puro assist, pasa bola. The blame game, the pointing, the finger pointing, gano'n nangyayari. Unlike in a parliamentary system, kung mapagod na ang taong bayan, pagod na kami sa passing the ball nyo, pagod na kami sa finger pointing ninyo, palitan na lang yung party in power with the new party because they are disorganized or whatever. So, yun po yun. So, I really want to pursue all of this parliamentary system of government because it might baka mas angkop na sa panahon sa panahon na lalo na ngayon na ang bilis ng pagbabago technology, even science so economic policies iba na mga economic theories ngayon wala pa bago-bago na so we can react siguro more quickly if we adopt a parliamentary system of government. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Napakalinaw
Chairman.
po ng pagpapaliwanag
Mr.
ng
Chairman.
ating Senator Pimentel. Nagtataas po 1962. Alam niyo po, senador po yan eh. Sigurado po ako yung sinasabi nilang pagbabago na yan kasi nung 1971 kasama po ang ama ng ating Senator Coco Pimentel. Gumawa po sila noong 1973 Constitution. Parliament na po yun eh. So nakita natin na talagang yung sinasabi nyo na dumadating talaga yung panahon na kailangan magpalit ng tumatakbo ang panahon eh. Kailangan nag-a-adjust. Sabi nga ni Senator Coco, dapat nag-a-adjust talaga. Ngayon po, pakinggan lang po natin. Sige po.
For the record ko lang ha, although member yung father ko sa 1971 Constitutional Convention, he did not vote for the draft. He refused to vote because of what happened, the subsequent happenings. Kasi may mga pressure doon, alam mo na, may mga bombing pa nga doon eh. Sa Quezon City Hall yata yun, sa comfort room. So, may mga subsequent events which are pressure delegates, mga ganun. So, ang ending po nun na my father refused to vote for that draft.
Makulay po kasi yung panahon na yan. 1971, wala pang martial law nun eh. Na-approve po ang 1973 na yung Constitution na-approve. Martial law na. Kaya nagkaroon na ng maraming...
ang pagpapatawag Secretary Carlos will correct me if I'm wrong. Ang election sa CONCON, wala pang martial law. But then CONCON pa rin, there was still a CONCON, there was a declaration of martial law. Am I correct, Secretary Carlos? Yes. Yes, yeah. Yes, ganun yun. So,
ano pa sila eh? Nagkakadimandaan pa sila.
so yun po na yun. So, imagine niyo na lang when you are now asked to vote for a draft, and then it was under a martial law situation. So, maraming influences po, which may not be maraming influences sa decision mo which may not be connected to the merit of the draft, di ba? So, yun po yung gusto kong sabihin. Okay. Salamat po.
Okay, maraming salamat po, Senator Pimentel. Meron pong gustong magdagdag si Ma'am...
Opo, sir. Kanina pa po.
Sandali lang po. Ma'am Sulita Munsod. Ma'am, kayo pala yan. Kanina kasi Ma'am, kamusta po? Long time no see. Opo, salamat po at...
Kasi merong mga ebidensya, studies have been made, and this is hard evidence. Alam niyo ba na only two countries, the period from 1962 to 1998, only two countries changed their form of government. There was Cyprus in 1970 and Sri Lanka in 1978, because it's very hard. And both of them shifted from parliamentary to presidential. That is the situation. Now,
I have a rebuttal to that.
Sandali lang po.
That is a fact.
Mr. Orion, sandali lang po. Tatawagin po kayo. Please lang po.
It's not putting in an argument.
Sir Orion, please po. Makikiusap lang po sa inyo ang committee. Always address the chairman.
That is a fact. I mean, please. All right. Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
No, I'm just trying to give the empirical findings.
Mr. Chairman,
This is not subject to argumentation. This is a fact. If you don't want me to give you facts,
Mr.
no
Chairman, point of
problem.
order. At least we should allow Ms. Monsod to finish her statement before any other resource person can butt in. That's
Yes, Vice Chairman. Opo, maraming salamat po. Tuloy po, ma'am. Opo.
I'm trying to get back. I'm sorry. I've lost it.
Habang hinahanap niyo po,
Yeah.
ma'am, magkukwentuhan lang po kami ni Senator Coco Pimentel dahil napakaganda po nung topic na pinag-uusapan natin. noon pa lang kasi nakikita mo na talaga, no, Senator, ano, talagang meron talagang need for change. Kasi 1935 Constitution, naging 1973, tapos naging hindi bago yung pagpapalit ng konstitusyon no?
Hindi, tsaka ito lang po Mr. Chairman.
I've got
Hindi,
it.
the mere fact na merong article sa Constitution na on how to change it, how to amend it. Ganun po yun. We really need to be flexible. Flexibility is the name of the game. Ngayon, our 1987 Constitution, because of the structures nga linagay doon, naging rigid tuloy. Although theoretically, andun yung way to amend it, pero imperfectly phrased yata yun na pagdating sa usapin tuloy sa constitutional change, imbis na sa merit tayo nung substance, ano ba yung babaguhin, oras natin na divert sa paano babaguhin. Ayun na. So kaya kaya nga ang trap, yan ang trap. Wag tayong bumagsak sa trap na yon. Merito ng proposal sa ating i-discuss. Then pagka maganda na yung meron na tayong conclusion na maganda. At meron tayong consensus, di ko sinasabing unanimity, but merong suporta ito sa majority. Saka natapos natin pag-usapan yung paano babaguhin. Kasi dinadivert tayo yung oras ubos doon sa paano, hindi napapag-usapan tuloy yung magagandang proposal. Ayusin na muna natin itong substance before procedure or process.
Maraming salamat po, Senator Pimentel. Ma'am?
Yeah.
Opo.
Yeah. Now, with respect to the form of government and corruption, ang mga studies, there are ambiguous, conflicting. There's one study where it says that the evidence supports that the theoretical finding that accountability is stronger. In other words, corruption and rent-seeking is less in presidential than in parliamentary. But that only happens when the quality of the democracy is good. If it is bad, that does not hold. Measured by the constraints on the what about other studies? Lederman in 2005 said parliamentary systems are associated with lower corruption. So one says presidential is with higher corruption, parliamentary is lower corruption. The finding supports the theory, of course. Now the form of government and democratic survivability. One study, Stepan and Skak, says parliamentary democracies had a high rate of survival, more than 3 times higher than that of a presidential democracy. Presidential democracies were more than twice as likely to have pure parliamentary democracies to experience a military coup. And not one presidential regime managed to survive as a democracy for 10 consecutive years, from 1980 to 1989, while 15 of the 41 parliamentary systems did. However, that study was criticized severely by another study which said that no evidence that constitutional type has had any significant bearing on the success of third world experiments in democracy. And there is no statistically significant difference between breakdown rates of presidential and parliamentary. In fact, the selection of successful parliamentary democracies was biased against Latin America in favor of Africa. So here are studies done empirically to test the experience of these forms of democracies, and this is their findings. Now, this is an empirical finding on the form of the government and government spending. Parliamentary democracies have larger government spending. The shift from parliamentary to presidential would reduce the total size of government spending by about 5% of GDP in the long run. Spending also grows much faster in parliamentary forms, and this is according to Person and Tabellini. More on government spending. A new majoritarian and presidential democracy cuts government consumption by almost 2%, while a new parliamentary democracy raises it considerably. The difference between the two forms of government is highly significant. Meaning to say, that difference is not zero. Now, with respect to, this is more empirical evidence with respect to form of government and structural reforms, defined as openness, protection of property rights. And the studies show that there is a large and significant correlation between parliamentary proportional democracy and structural reforms. There is significant, and another study says that there is significant correlation between parliamentary systems and openness. But with respect to the government and economic performance, the form of government and economic performance, there is no significant effect of parliamentary system on economic performance as measured by per capita GDP, total factor productivity, and labor productivity. That is one study. And another study says a new parliamentary democracy grows 1.5% less than a new presidential democracy. These are the empirical facts that come out of studies. So, in summary, there is conflicting empirical evidence as to which form of government will lead to lower corruption. That is, there is conflicting evidence as to whether constitutional type has any significant bearing on the survival of democracies. But the evidence is pretty strong that presidential regimes have smaller spending, meaning to say government spending as a percentage of GDP than parliamentary regimes. And a parliamentary system is systematically correlated with structural policies. But a parliamentary system has no significant effect on economic performance. And the sixth takeaway here is a new presidential system grows faster than a new parliamentary system. This all come from studies. No argument on my side. These are what comes out. Right?
Okay, sige po.
Just a question. Were those conclusions your conclusions or conclusions of a study?
No, these are the studies.
Study? Sige.
Yes, I think these are.
So around six, no? Six major.
My conclusion.
Okay, that you just read the study. So nakuha ba ng stenographer natin yung the name of the study? So we can.
These are several studies. These are the whole.
Several studies, but you listed the 6 conclusions.
From those several studies.
Yes, from those several studies. So thank you for
just summarize.
Yes, thank you for summarizing the studies for us. Yun lang yung kinaklaro ko. Salamat po.
Maraming salamat. Tapos na po kayo?
Yes.
Meron lang pong sasabihin si Secretary Clarita Carlos.
Yes, thank you very much. I would like to compliment my colleague, Professor Monsod. We're colleagues at the University of the Philippines. I at the Department of Political Science and Professor Monsod at the School of Economics. I complimented her because she presented empirical evidence which were done by social scientists in regard to which type of structure would enable us to reach the desired result. There is no doubt that if you will notice, some of them are conflicting results. Yes, and as it should be. As it is in the nature of social science research. Mainly because social scientists, including economists who are social scientists, use different variables to test, and they also have different levels of confidence when they test. And so when Professor Monsod talks about no statistical difference, it simply means that whatever difference that you're seeing is happening by chance. But when she says that there is a very high correlate, that means that they are moving in certain kinds of direction, which in fact are related to each other. This would be for the benefit of those provide you another assumptive framework, which is that every political system is unique. While it is true that we're able to detect patterns among them, it's not always the case that countries are comparable, because they're mostly not. Even social scientists, when we even investigate the same issue area, we in fact are investigating it in a different way because we are weighing the variables with different potencies, and that already changes the conceptual framework. So I agree, let us listen to the empirical evidence and let us listen to colliding evidence also pertinent to this. That's the reason why in advance of this session, Senator Padilla, remember I was telling you, let us look at the pluses and the minuses, but I still argue there will be more pluses for parliamentary systems. Thank you.
Meron po kayong gustong idagdag? Okay. Okay po. Study lang. Opo. Meron po tayong iwan muna po natin yung topic na yan. Puntahan muna po natin yung kung bakit po tayo nandito. Ito po ay patungkol sa resolusyon ng ginawa po ni Senator Win Gatchalian na ang gusto po niya ay magkaroon ng Constitutional Assembly at nagpo-propose po siya ng amendments sa restrictive economic provisions ng 1987 Constitution. Ito po ay nag-request po si Senator Win Gatchalian na gusto po niyang mahingi ang opinyon ng ating mga secretaries. Kaya po natin inimbitahan yung ating mga kalihim at tayo naman po ay sinwerte at pinagpala na tayo po ay pinagdagdigan ng ating kalihim sa national security, ang ating pong ginagalang na si Secretary Clarita Carlos. Ay, ang tanong po ng ating senador, kung magkakaroon daw po ba ng epekto sa seguridad kung babaguhin po natin ang magkakaroon ng amenda sa konstitusyon patungkol po sa economic.
The answer is certainly yes. Mainly because when I came in as a national security advisor, I did not set aside the external threat, which is a source of our insecurity, but I stress as a political scientist the human security aspect. Therefore, whatever changes you want to make in regard to the 1987 Constitution, whether they are economic changes, whether they are political changes, etc., they will invariably link to how we enhance the security of the individual, food security, energy security, health security, security of your person. Anytime the government performs well, it redounds to the benefit of the individual, human security.
Ibig pong sabihin po ba, mahal naming kalihim, na kapag pumasok po, pinayagan natin ang mga dayuhan na magnegosyo dito, maaari po bang makaapekto ito sa seguridad ng ating bansa? Maaari po ba na sila ay maging threat sa atin?
Siguro mas marami yung hindi threat sa sa pagpumasok ang mga dayuhan, no? Kasi ito siguro yung sinusulong ng marami na alisin na yung 60-40 restriction. And ang mangyayari nito down the line is that of course the President of the Republic would like to create jobs, especially for 2 years talagang nilampaso tayo ng pandemic. So when they come in, they bring in capital, they bring in factories, manufacturing, innovation. They create jobs. You create jobs, somebody is paying for his amortization for a house, he has money to pay for the amortization of the house. Human security. You create jobs, they will put their children to school, education. We are educators here, Professor Mansod and I. That is in fact the nerve center of economic and political development. So yes, anything that we do to liberalize the environment within which work happens, within which our daily acts of living happens, redounds to the benefit of the individual.
Ang issue po yata kasi ay patungkol po sa telecommunication. Yun po yung number 1 na nire-raise nila. Na kapag naibigay yung pag-aari sa dayuhan, baka yung ating pong, alam nyo na, dyan nag-uumpisa yung mga bagay-bagay na nakukuha nila, yung mga impormasyon. Yung po ba ay sa palagay po nyo, pwede na maging threat po yun, yung telecommunication?
Well, I've always been an iconoclast, Senator Robin, so I don't think so, with all due respect. By the way, even if we think we are in fact secure, we're not secure, I'm sure you know the capability of your telephones and they can be intruded into and the like. Believe me, whoever gives us the stronger, faster internet, he can come from Jupiter and I don't care. Because we're moving towards globalization. Economies are already meshed with each other. So do we care who owns what, I think I care who gives the best service. And I really don't care who you are. Whether you're a corporate person or you are a corporation, you're an individual, you're a collective, whoever gives the best service. There is no socialist way of repairing a road, is there? Is there a democratic way of repairing a road? No, you just repair the road, and it doesn't even have a label on it. I think we should be, we should be realistic about these things. Why are we putting labels on everything and putting political color? The telcos want to come here, let them come here. If the present telcos are not giving us the services that we want, we're one of the slowest telcos in the world. As I said, you can come from Saturn and I don't care.
Maraming salamat.
So hanggang dito lang tayo mga tol. Maraming salamat sa panonood at patuloy na suporta. God bless you sa inyo lahat at hanggang sa muli. Paalam.